All right, welcome. Great to see everyone today. We're continuing this series of soul rest, and today we're talking about paradox. Paradox being two contradictions coming together to sort of make sense, or at least to work. Paradox. And it's not unusual for God to combine two opposing ideas. Look at marriage, for example. It's like opposites attract, right? But as with most things that God calls to with paradox, without God in the middle of it, that which is paradoxical can destroy itself. Opposites attract. They can destroy each other without God in a marriage, right? And all that he brings. So there's an essence in the way that God does paradox that requires God to be involved. Try and live it out of dust and not breath, and you're going to have all sorts of troubles in there. So when we think of paradox, and remember this is in the context of our series Soul Rest. If you haven't read that, if you're visiting us today, it's a 6-week series. We have books up the back, I think, that we're giving away. If not, we can send you the file. So we're talking about what is rest in God? What is Sabbath? What does it mean to be at peace with our soul? And there's an element where paradox comes into play. Because we've looked in a lot of detail now that we're created from the dust, but to be alive, there needs to be breath. They're sort of a paradox. And the way God does paradox is normally through a thing we call rhythm. 1, 1, 1, 1. It's not all at the same time. It's one gives, one gives, one gives, one gives, one gives, one receives. One gives, one receives. And so we see this rhythm in life. And so you'll often see that paradox and rhythm work together. Sometimes you can interchange the word. For example, strength is found in what? Weakness. What the heck is that? Well, it's reliance on God. When your strength runs out, then you make room for God to work. When we stop trying, God has room to move. To give up your life to save it. Peace is found best in tribulation. See, it's a rhythm. It's one feeds the other, and we find God when we run out of our resource, often in the other. More, for example, is found in less. More is found in less. What? How can there be more in less? Well, because God gets involved. But let's have a look at this. I actually did the research on this week, that performance actually does drop in our life with an excess of activity. The more we try, the less effective we get. There's a graph coming up on screen. Here we go. This is research from Stanford University. Productivity drops so drastically after 50 hours of a working week that if someone works 70 hours, doesn't have any more productivity or output than someone who's worked 55 hours. Fascinating. The Whitehall 2 study found that working over 55 hours a week compared to around 40 or less was linked to cognitive performance, lower vocabulary, reasoning and creative thinking. So you measurably drop in your capacity once you hit a limit. Working beyond 55 hours a week is associated with a 60% increase in the risk of depression and a 74% increase in anxiety. So if you're sick of your situation, if you're just pushing it too hard, it's probably just that you're sick. It's not just your situation. It's the way we approach it. But this isn't just a message for the overworkers. So we found it's interesting the feedback we get as we mull after these services. That's okay for those who don't work, or that's okay for those who overwork, or whatever. It's actually a paradox. It's all of us. There's something in this for all of us. Because underworking, and few of us diagnose ourselves or self-diagnose ourselves as being underworkers, right? Where we're just not doing enough. We call it rest. But underworking robs the true effect of rest. Productivity and growth in our lives thrives in contrast. There's no good just having a pull if there's no push. There's no good just having light if there's no dark. There's a contrast brings life. So we find that when God worked in Genesis 1 with creation, God worked, then he could rest and say it is good. Athletes train and they strain, but on the rest day, that's the day where they actually grow. The exercise isn't what grows them. The rest period is where the growth happens. If there's no work, there's no benefit from the rest. It's just being idle. So the healthy paradox is found between these two places. So I want to use two biblical words that will differ from our words. And if you don't feel comfortable with them, don't worry, just blame the Bible. That's where we found them. You think, mate, this doesn't apply to me. This is definitely my spouse or something like that. But whatever. Let's abstain from judgment of ourselves and anyone else, and let's just go with the flow. The first word is the donkey, the driven donkey. So we're looking at two biases now. The driven donkey. One would normally think donkeys aren't really driven, but in Bible speak, the donkey is wild. They're just self-willed, determined, they do what they want to do. And there's a famous donkey verse, which is Psalm 32, verse 9. I didn't know it was famous until I started Googling this verse for different reasons. And now and again it would just come up, this is the famous donkey verse. Okay. Do not be like the horse or the mule, the donkey, which have no understanding, but must be controlled by a bit and a bridle, or they will not come to you. Psalm 32, 9. Now, you may remember I've spoken into this verse a few times about how God had to use this verse to really rein my life in. Because if I'm anything, I'm the donkey out of these two. But we find, let the buyer beware a little bit, because we'll actually find that most of us spend time in both contrasts, and adding 1 plus 1 we think adds up to 2 when it really just adds up to mess. Okay, let's see where this goes. So the spiritual donkey is driven, but not dumb. They're unbridled, self-initiating, maverick, ambitious, achiever. I've got to tell you, as a pastor, whenever I see an overachiever, and forgive me if you're one of them, I see a problem. Because to be an overachiever in life normally would mean something has had to be given up in your life to make that overachieving. Because it's overachieving in comparison to who? To other people, who, most of which are living somewhat of a normal life. It's not that you're 300% smarter, 300% stronger. No, you just pressed into one part of life, pushed it really hard for a long time, and you've excelled. Normally at the expense of something else. Bless your soul. So the spiritual donkey normally has an unidentified dynamo driving on the inside. There's a slave driver whipping them into action. I need to achieve, because when I achieve, I'm good. I feel good. I look good. I get rewarded in life, and so they pursue stuff really hard. But it's really they're a slave to their own ambition in that sense. And God says He needs to harness you. That's what this verse is about. But nobody likes a harness. Nobody likes being bridled. It's uncomfortable. It's like, I don't want this thing. Yeah, but we all need that thing. We need the bridle. And He's saying, don't be like the horse or the mule, which have no understanding. They don't get what's going on. They're out of control. They're just living self-determined life. You need a bridle of some sort to bring you back so God can steer our life. Often, it's a bit like the wild thoroughbred horse that really is of no use unless it's broken. And God will often take the initiative to go to work on the spiritual donkey and break them for their own good. The next extreme on the other side is the sluggard. Don't you love that word? It just rolls off the tongue, you sluggard. You know, it's the disengaged but entitled, saying, I'm expecting the blessing. You know, we thrive on the grace verses and God is love, and there's no performance, there's no condemnation, all that kind of stuff. And so there's a disengagement that also carries with it an entitlement that says, well, I've got no part to play in anything, and the little that I've done feels like enough for me because there's no resilience and no character there. But really, it's a disengaged sluggard. And I love this verse, Proverbs 6, 6-8. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer. Yet it stores its provision in summer and gathers its food at harvest. It's just saying that the ant, go to the ant, you sluggard. Don't be lazy. The ant knows how to do this. It knows that it doesn't overdo itself, but it just consistently does the things it needs to do for life to be life. And it doesn't need to be told, it just goes about that. And so the sluggard is normally disengaged, waiting for life to come to them, unstretched. Interestingly, I've noticed with the sluggard types, is they seldom know what it is to experience God's power in their life. They're always waiting, but never seeing able to receive or work from God's power. Normally because they never need it. There's no demands there. There's no push out to advance the kingdom and so on. So there's a little of both extremes often, and forgive the wording, but you know, in both of us. Those extremes can be there, where we can go into both excess and we can go into abdication, and we can assume that 1 + 1 equals some form of balance, but it couldn't be further from the truth. It's just imbalance. So the paradox does lie somewhere in between. And Proverbs 13:4 introduces another term. It says, the sluggard's appetite is never filled, but the desires of the diligent are fully satisfied. So in response to the donkey and the sluggard, there's this new term called the diligent. And a diligent person is one who lives intentionally. So there's a diligence, there's a definiteness about what they're doing. They're saying, I know what needs to be done, and I'm like the ant. I do what I'm supposed to do without being instructed to do that. They live intentionally, responsibly, fruitfully. So between the donkey and the disengaged is the diligent. So they know their responsibility and they know God's responsibility. There's things that only God can do, and they're happy to leave that. That's where rest comes for us, where I do what's required of me. I'm faithful. But I'm doing that in faith because what God's responsible for is his concern. So I don't worry myself about what is God's concern. That's up to him to fulfill that. And so with this life of diligence, they understand this rhythm where it seems like a paradox. I can't bear fruit without God. In other words, I can do nothing, and yet he'll do nothing unless I get involved. And so there's me plus God is best. And we see this really clearly, for example, in Matthew 4, where Jesus calls Peter. He's been pushing it. He's a businessman. He's been out all night with his guys saying, come on, just get to it. There's got to be fish here somewhere. And you know the story in Matthew 4 where there's no fish. He's done all that he can do in his own strength, even though he's good. And Jesus knew he was good, and the world knew he was good. Peter knew he was good. He's made a living out of fishing. No one knew more than Peter. And yet it was coming up short, at least it did on that night. And then Jesus comes and he's preaching a word and says, hey, put your nets out on the other side. He goes, look, I've done that all night. I know what I'm doing. He says, yeah, just indulge me. And so he throws his net out and it overflows the boat. And you can just imagine the scene where Peter's good. Jesus has just shown that he's better. But what's the plan? Is Jesus' plan go, I'm going to do everything for you? He says, no, I will make you to be a fisher of men. I'm going to form you and you'll go fishing. But if you don't go fishing, the formation doesn't mean a whole lot. I'm going to fuel you and you will follow me. So Simon plus Jesus is best. It was never just Simon, and it wasn't to be just Jesus. It's a partnership. It's a rhythm. And the paradox works that way. So diligence isn't the same as a balance between two errors. And the default we can have, and I'm with you on this, is that we can take the sum total of our life and feel okay about it in a sense that I may push a bit too hard over here, but I'm really relaxed over here, And it's like, put these two things together and we're doing okay. And yet we've missed the point somewhat about what this rhythm of grace begins to look like. And it's a little bit like if you've ever had to calibrate an instrument or something, and these days where it's got, or line up your Starlink dish or whatever the different things you do these days, you'll see a gradient on your app or something that goes, it's red, 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 red. You go too far, it's red, 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 red. In the middle, whoop, got it. It's green, it's a sweet spot. And if I go this side or this side, I'm in error. But if I'm just there, it's a sweet spot. And so we need to know what this diligent sweet spot is in our life, where God's doing what he can do and we're doing what we must, and knowing the difference and knowing the rest that's found in that space. And so we find this diligence, this sweet spot in what Jesus called the yoke. And so in your readings this week, you'll have gone through this whole exercise of the yoke. The yoke is not an egg. Someone told me their group is still grappling. You mean the yoke is an egg? The yoke is the beam between two oxen in those days that joined them two together. So the yoke joins us with another one who is strong. But we have to, if I'm on this edge, I need to be bridled by that yoke. So if I'm the crazy donkey, I'm bridled to the yoke. And there's an experienced, strong, rhythmed, stronger bull there that will teach me how to walk in that yoke. But if I'm disengaged, I have to learn to take on the yoke, to cooperate, to take real steps, to get involved, to walk with the one who is stronger than I am. So let's have a look at that principle. Matthew 11:28. Jesus says in the version that you probably read, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened. I will give you rest. Take my yoke." Interesting paradox there. I will give you rest. Take on a yoke, right? And you will learn from me. For I'm humble and gentle in heart, and you'll find rest for your soul. So there's actually rest in working, or rest in the context of working. For my yoke is easy, my burden's light. So to find the rest that we need to watch and walk with Jesus. There's a yoke for all of us, regardless of how we feel on those different spectrums. But look at Eugene Peterson's paraphrase, and it's one of the rare times I'll quote a paraphrased version, but Eugene Peterson's just a wonderful pastor, great teacher, and he just got the spirit of this. He says, "Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me." See, there's the two things going on there, walk and work. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. And ill-fitting becomes the key phrase for me here. I've spent years in this verse, years in this translation, where you get the rhythm. There's walking, there's working, there's pushing hard, there's pulling back. But he won't lay anything ill-fitting on us. And so the rest is involved. I've had to work really hard at discovering this rest. And for those of you who know me and my story over the years, this year has been probably the most balanced year I've had, at least one where I've had the most margin that I've had for at least a couple of decades. And I'm loving it. You know, it's just you've got capacity to think and do things and pray and imagine and dream. But my little hobby to enforce this, my intention, my diligence, we've moved house out to Curralee. We've got a bit more land there, and there's about an acre of gardens there that we have to look after and manicure and grow. And I've loved, and for me it feels like Genesis 1. I don't know whether you can relate to where it says that Adam would walk in the garden with God. You know, but the garden doesn't grow itself, right? My back knows how hard I'm working. I'm mulching, I'm irrigating, I'm digging holes, I'm planting trees, we're doing all this, I'm pulling out the weeds. I'm doing that. But I tell you, there's nothing better than at 6 a.m. in the morning when the whipbirds are out and the kookaburras are starting up, or at 6 p.m. at night when the sun's going down and it's coming through the trees. You walk with God in the garden. And you see the odd weed and you pick it up, you have a chat with God and he gives you something, you know, as a download you didn't receive before. But we're walking and we're working in the garden. And your life is a garden like that. You've got to work in it, sure, but also give yourself a chance to walk in it as well as work. But here's that phrase, that not ill-fitting. And this is where I really, really want to press in today, because we're all good people. I haven't met anyone here that I don't like, that I'd say they were a bad person. We're all doing our best, right? We're trying to get this thing right. But there's this sense where, as I was preparing this is the verse that stuck out. Is there anything that's ill-fitting? Is there anything heavy on you? Is there something about your life where you go, it's ill-fitting? It's like a jacket that doesn't work. It's too small or whatever. And some of our lives we're finding no longer fit us because we've developed our life in our younger years and we've taken a trajectory, and now it's like this life isn't fitting anymore. There's something about it. Our expectations on ourselves are now outpacing our bodies or those around us. Normally it's those around us who suffer before we do, especially if we're the driven types. We're pushing really hard in one area of life, and it's our families that begin to suffer. It's our families that are crying out, not us. And so we don't understand. Just get better, we say. Get bigger. Try harder. I'm working real hard here. You know, what are you doing about this? And it's ill-fitting life is what it is. There's something upon us. The yoke is not right. We're dancing to the wrong tune in some part. Some part of our life is out of kilter and someone is screaming. But we don't allow or we don't accept that the potential solution for this is I need to change radically some area of my life because it's ill-fitting now. It could be incremental, but it could be macro. We might need a big change in our life if this thing's going to work out. So what does it mean for us to be burned out on religion? We're a very different context to what Jesus was talking to. They were under a Jewish, religious, law-based, temple-oriented system. We're not under that. We're in effect what the Bible would call Gentiles. We don't get all the religious stuff. Just give us grace, forgiveness, power, and we're off, right? So we don't tend to suffer under the same demands of what he may have been talking into there. But what it can mean is that he offers of one world, that the offers of one world oppose the expectations of the other. And what I mean by that is our religious world, your morality now, your ethics, your worldview of Christianity is in direct opposition to the life you feel compelled to live by the world that's giving you no choice. Are you burned out on that? The fact that I have a grid that I know is true, but I have to water it down, I have to recalibrate it or truncate it if it's going to fit into this other life, which requires me to earn a bunch of money and support a house and do all this sort of stuff, work all those hours, put the very best of who I am into that. Because if I don't, I'm out of work, right? AI is going to take over my job or something. Are you burned out on the religious demands of that? I think that's more how we can apply it to ours. You can feel that strain of trying to do both. And in one of those areas, normally one of those areas you're doing well. You're doing well in the world life or you're doing well in the God life, but one of them seems to be compromising on the way through. So it might be career versus family. It might be whatever it is. Money versus generosity. I don't know. Maybe you're burned out from managing shame and condemnation. It's like, I'm just this Christian life thing. I'm being bombarded by a set of values and a set of images and all the stuff in life, but I'm feeling the shame of this over on this side, and I just can't make these two things work. Are you burned out on religion? You need a better yoke. The yoke's not fitting you. It's the wrong yoke. Jesus' yoke is better. Maybe it's family tension. The world's expectation, your expectation, is coming against spiritual meaning and connection. You can't find God. You can't find God together. You need a different yoke. You need to find God. You need to find life with the people around you. Maybe it's the burden of tomorrow, and we've talked into that a few weeks ago. It's driving you to panic. You're worried about because the world's given you an expectation of what your future needs to look like. And so but your today means I've got to live with God and I've got to give time and money away, and it's too much for you. So Jesus postured the question, is life hard for you? Is that life hard for you? And I just want to put that question to us all, because I think it's a question that our reflex might be, no, it's hang on. How is it going? Is life ill-fitting for you? Is it you're feeling that tension between these two worlds? Do you feel like you're swimming in mud or rowing against the tide? I can give all sorts of analogies around this. Most of us would say, now that you mention it, it's hard for me. This tension between these two worlds is starting to wear me down, and I don't know how to deal with it. And this statement, this question, changed the life of a really driven donkey called Saul, who we know as Paul. In Acts 26, Jesus had to pull him up, and he'll do this, particularly with the overambitious, particularly with the donkeys, one way or the other. And he said, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, but I'm going to do it because I love you too much to leave you in a driven, overachieving state. You need to find my yoke. So in Acts 26, we see Saul, who for all intents and purposes, as far as he's concerned, he is as driven because he sees that as faithfulness. And he is more driven than anyone else around. He's learnt more, he knows more, he works harder. He even thinks killing people is the right thing to do. But yeah, I'm prepared to do that as well. Whatever my religion and my worldview requires, I'll do it bigger, better, faster than anyone. So God finally ankle taps him, and you know the story where he's knocked off his horse. It says, I saw a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, blazing around me and my companions. We all fell to the ground. I heard a voice saying to me in Aramaic, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Is it hard for you to kick against the goads? And I just want to reflect that question today. Is it hard for you to kick against the goads? It's like kicking against the inevitable, like swimming against the tide, pushing an irresistible force. Are you not getting tired of this? You can just see Jesus saying, hey, dude, we'll talk about all the stuff you're doing really wrong in a minute, but are you not tired from this? And I wonder if your tiredness is just that light on the dashboard flashing away saying, change required. Change required. Paul had gone too far into unreasonable excess. Now, I admire people who can achieve stuff, but there's unreasonable excess, right? He'd gotten off track. Self-righteous people, his self-righteousness was hurting other people. It took a word from God to pull him in the line, and in the end, he did it the hard way. Dude, you need to be broken. You need to be bridled. You need to be on a yoke. And so he blinded him until he could really see. So for many of us, this has been our story. Certainly, I could give you a long and terrible story about how this took me years to be blind until I could see. And our first response when God starts to prompt us on this, you don't understand, it's impossible to change this life now. I've got the massive mortgage, I've got the expectations, my career's taken a certain path, I've got all the quals, I'm doing all, you don't understand God, now it's too late. And I remember the picture God gave me as I was driving home with my version of that argument was, I've got all these plates spinning in my life now. You've given all of them to me, God. Spin, spin. I can't let go of any of these. And now you've loaded me off with this problem and I can't spin that plate. And I don't know what to do. And so it looks like there's no way to change. And within a day, God showed me how he just went, all the plates are gone. Day's all broken, Pat. And it's like the whole world just says, so what? So what? Let him be broken. No one cares. Only you. And all those plates were given to me by God. But it's my stewardship and management of God's calling, or the lack of, that took me into excess to the point where the people around me were breaking. And so we can do it the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is about finding rest, putting on the yoke in incremental ways. I'm not going to go into the detail of the passage, but look it up later if you will, if you're taking notes. Mark chapter 6, we see Jesus. He's tired, pretty much worn out. And he's just heard word that John the Baptist has been killed. He's just had the disciples come back from their mission trip and they're all going, we are awesome. Did you see what God did? You know, and they're sharing their war stories and he's going, I saw Satan fall like a lightning bolt. And meanwhile, in his inner heart, he's managing the grief of his cousin being beheaded. And he's pretty done. He says, okay, guys, we need to get away for a bit. Let's get in the boat. We're going because we need time out. We need to rest. I need to rest. He was a human being with a human body. And they get in the boat, but the story goes, all the people followed them. They watched them and go, he's heading over there, let's go. So when they got there, it was ministry time again. So they've had a micro rest. On the boat trip, they probably had and then they get to the shore thinking they're going to get a macro. And so maybe you can relate to how that feels. It's like, you know you need a break. And then you get to the holiday resort and the phone rings and suddenly a relative's on their deathbed or work's fallen apart, you need to go back, something like that. You just go, God, you know I need a break. And all you've had is the micro break. So all I'm saying there in that initial part is take those micro breaks. Because God never calls us to abdicate life. He calls us to abdicate imbalance. But in those spikes of pressure, he will give us what we need to get through that spike. But the real rest is coming. And so rest sometimes is a faith requirement where we say, I cannot change the trajectory of my life in a day, but I certainly can in 2 months. And so I had to readjust. The way I've gotten margin in my life, for example, was I really figured out last October that I was out of balance. There was just too much going on. So it took me literally about 5 months to be able to recalibrate my life to the point where there's margin and balance back again. So I think that's a wise way to do it. You don't just drop all the balls. You don't just not turn up anymore. You don't just say, I'm done. You say, no, I'm making a commitment to get it right. And it might take 2 months, 5 months, it might take a year, but it's unacceptable, the reality that I'm in. I'm going to give myself some time. And so as Jesus did, you get the micro break for a moment. And God knows what's enough because his trajectory and our trajectory, if it's right, he'll get us there in the end. And so they turn up at the shore and all the people are there and Jesus has compassion because it's who he is. He says, I can't not do something with this. This is unacceptable. For me to walk away would be to defy my calling. And so he says, okay, guys, shirt up. We're on. And they're going, Peter goes, send them away. We haven't got any food and money. Like, this is crazy. And Jesus goes, you feed them. So he begins to delegate some roles there. He starts to farm it off. He's not going to die on this hill. How about we all play a part? God plays a part. What have you got? Bread, fishes, and they feed the 5,000. Amazing. While he was tired. Then he says, guys, this time you're going on the boat. I'm staying here, because if those suckers follow you, I'm not going to get caught out again. I don't know. But anyway, he sends them on a boat. Maybe he's thinking, if I'm even hanging around Peter and he's whinging, I'm not going to get any rest either. So he says, I better go on my own for a bit. So he sends them, and then he stays back, and he has a macro break with God, spends the night with God. Okay, I'm back. I'm fueled. In fact, he was so fueled he could do more with less. Didn't need a boat. Let's go for a walk on the water. So we see the most powerful work, the most incredible, miraculous stories in Jesus' life were in the context of his greatest tiredness. So he took advantage of the micro and the macro. Push, pull. So the paradox, the yoke, was found in an acceptable amount of both and an intention to find rest. And so maybe that's the secret in some of our lives. Can't do it all today, but we can have it done within a year. So I guess the question is, are you breathing? Are you able to take those little breaks daily? Sometimes for me, I actually read a bit of research this week that said for every, I think, 55 minutes it was closer to 90 minutes of work, there's like a 20 to 30 minute brain break that makes you the most effective. I'm not there yet. I can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I feel like I'm back. But we all have to find our thing. But there's micro breaks through your day that actually make you more effective. There's micro breaks in your relationships where you stop it being about what you want and it's about someone else then. There's rhythm in all of this, and maybe we need to recalibrate. So the diligent person, diligence is all about intention. Intention. So you never drift into a balanced life with this. So don't assume it's just going to happen on its own. It can't. To be diligent means there's intention. It's going to need to be you on the bridle. We need the yoke. And watch him, follow him, walk and work with Jesus. And it's going to require, okay, I need to make sure I do this, make sure I do that. So schedule your day where you can. Take intentional breaks. Set your course for your life. Be diligent about all that, because it's not going to happen by accident. So maybe you've drifted into imbalance. Maybe you think the people around you have and you're okay. I don't know. But we need God to speak into it, because paradox is only found in a healthy way with the presence of Jesus in our life. Amen? So let's just pray and let's just invite God into that space in our heart. So I asked the question, and Holy Spirit, I pray only you would speak. Is there something ill-fitting about your life? It doesn't fit anymore. It fitted before, it's not fitting now. Life's changed, we've moved on. The disciplines and the lifestyle of 10 years ago won't fit today. Sometimes it's a stage of life and age. Sometimes it's a family issue with kids and careers we've got to juggle and change. Sometimes we need to make a macro change and just invest in the intention. So, Father, is there a part of our life that's out of balance? Is there a place where I'm receiving but I need to be giving? Is there a middle ground that I need to find where your yoke fits easy upon myself and the important people in my life? My yoke is easy. My burden is light. If it's ill-fitting for you, make the decision right now. I'm taking it off. It's unsatisfactory. It's unacceptable to have an ill-fitting yoke upon your life, whatever it is. Sometimes it's a relationship. That person in your life is leading you on a course that's with them there, it's inevitable, and you need to take that yoke off. Paul called it being unequally yoked. We need to find and be around people who share our values and our dreams, the people who are closest. It's very important. So, Father, I pray where there's change required, Lord, give us your grace, give us your love and your power to make those choices.